As I said in at least one of the videos prior to this one, as we're working along the CSS-Designer, I've told you that I would guide you along the way to get about half of it done, and then I'd expect for you to do the rest of it. And please use Visual Studio Code for the rest of it. I just want to show you, we'll take a little break here and show you another tool that you could use. You could use it right now in conjunction with Visual Studio, or use it just to get a feel of how CSS is really working. And I say in conjunction with because in the end you're going to need to put all your code in Visual Studio Code in order to publish it to your GitHub website. So in this video, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you this other tool, and then I'm going to show you how to get it back onto the Visual Studio Code so that you can publish it. And the tool that I'm talking about, I'm going to open up a new tab in my browser, is it's CodePen. And I asked you earlier in the semester to get an account. And the account helps because then you can create what they call a pen, which is just a file with code, and save it. You don't have to have an account. You could actually literally, without even signing in, work a pen. It will allow you to do that. But like I said here, just so that you can keep track of what's going on and then maybe compare your work later, definitely I'd say go with CodePen and get an account. Okay, so my pen opened up and it looks like I've already set my settings to have the code on the side. If yours looks like this, which it probably does, and it occupies a lot of space, maybe your screen is larger. Mine, I have it a little bit compacted here so that it doesn't take too much memory, but the view that I prefer is to have the code on the side. The code on the side, this is going to be, I can't think of it as a file that's out there because it's one file, yes, maybe, but it has code for HTML, which we already have. It has code for CSS, which we're working on, and then it actually has a little space here for JavaScript. This doesn't have any JavaScript, so I'm clicking on the line and dragging it down to resize it. Same thing with this one. Since, like I said, my screen currently is just a little bit more tightly put into the screen, I'm going to make my text a little bit smaller to the point where I can still read it. I wear bifocals and I can still read this okay, so hopefully you can follow along. Like I said, we still have Visual Studio open because we depend on this for our code. And so let me go into my Explorer in Visual Studio. I'm already on week 4. I'm working on the index file, which is fine. The only changes that we made recently, or at least that I made recently, I corrected a misspelling in one of the tags. I'm going to click just anywhere, just once inside of the code, and I'm going to press Control A on my PC, Command A on your Mac, and then I'm going to right click and tell it to copy this code. Once I do that, I'm going to return then to the CodePen and make sure that I click on the HTML code window, right click and paste. So what happens is that now I have transferred, or at least copied, the code from my Visual Studio Code and put it into this CodePen. It's okay if you see the HTML, all you want to see it. It's great, I mean, because you know what you're working with. But I'm going to be concentrating more on the CSS since that's what this part of the exercise is. So I'm going to make this screen a little bit smaller just to get more CSS in there. I'll return to my Visual Studio Code, and then I'm going to jump into the styles.css file. This is the one that continues. We still have to follow the recipe. We still have a few steps. So what I want to do is at least get the menu, or at least part of the menu, done in CodePen. Same process. I'm going to click anywhere in the CSS and press Control A. That selects everything. Command A on your Macintosh, right click and copy. Now I jump back to Visual Studio Code and I right click and paste. When that happens, I get to see the design that I have been working with, and unfortunately it's not an easy step to just get it to display our images. Our images exist in our computer and they exist in GitHub, but in order for them to be here, I would have to add a very definite link to the file elsewhere. But since we're just working with the design, I'm just interested in making this list, that's a bulleted list currently, turn into the first buttons that will be the menu for our web page. Like I said, in the end, they're going to look a little bit like this. We're going to add some styling that will make sure that every single one of these bullet points becomes text that is colored and it's inside a box and shifted to the left. So let me open up the recipe again. Maybe you already have it open. And I'm going to follow the rest of the recipe. Right now we should be approaching the nav element, and there are several tags here. I'm going to go with as many as I can. I probably won't get as far as the pseudo class. I'm probably going to stop here with the A tag, this being the link. So the nav element, and I'll see it just to see it clearly in Visual Studio Code. We have been working, every time that I say an element is a well-known part in HTML. There are now semantic elements, semantic being that it's a word that represents what the tag does. So they have changed it, and they, the people that do HTML, and particularly HTML5, that's what we're working with, have chosen body, header, and they have chosen a footer code, and they have articles, and they have sections, and they have all these new things. And I say like there's a whole bunch of them, but there's really about 10 semantic codes. One of the other semantic codes that's real useful is nav, the nav for navigation elements. So for a navigation element, by the way, every time that if you have a question about what I'm talking about, make sure that in the recipe, if you see that there's a link and you want to know more about nav elements, it will take you to W3 Schools and tell you more about how it's used. And it shows you how the difference, what the differences are between the new version of HTML5 and the older ones. I'm just going to set the float to left. So float, and I'm only going to look at this real quick. This is how it's used. Float right. Be sure to review the CSS code as you're going. So we're floating it to the left in my code, and now I'm going to be in CodePen. I'm going to add my new code down here and say that the nav, open bracket, press space, and in here I'm going to say to float, colon, and we want it on the left, semicolon. And you see right away that there's a change. This little block, the one that represents the navigation that has all these bullet points, has now been shifted to the left, and everything else that's close to it is aligned to the right of it. That's the way that the float works in CSS. It pushes everything within this element between the codes that is in navigation and your HTML. If I see it on the HTML, we see that navigation are these lines right here. This is that code that produces this. The CSS that pushes it left takes all of this and then gives us that effect. To continue, the next change that we need to make is to set the width to 150 pixels. Right now the width is just sort of a default, so everything is squishing it. If I say create the width, colon, 150 px, semicolon, then the block that is pushing things to the right of it, because it's floating left, becomes 150 pixels wide. There are tools out there that will allow you to measure how many pixels you have, but it's really too much. You have to trust that the computer is actually doing what you want it to do. So that's the first change for the nav. And let's switch back to our recipe. We have now, if you want to know more about the width, by the way, be sure to click and go to W3 Schools. The nav element, we continue, and we're going to add a UL tag. UL being an unordered list, which is what we have. Just as an example, in our recipe, we have two kinds of lists inside of this recipe. One of them here is an ordered list, in that it has numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have an unordered list. This could be in any order. It's just bullet points. So it's just a quick way to get information out there. So our nav element, the UL tag, which is added after our nav. There's no real way to sort of cradle everything within it. So I'm just going to say that in addition to the nav that we already have, we also want to address the unordered list that's attached, or rather that cascades from the nav. I open up a bracket and follow the recipe. We're going to set the padding to 0px. So this is the padding all around. And I may have mentioned before that when you have 0 pixels, whenever you have 0 sum of anything, it just means just scrunch everything. You don't have to make any expansion. So we'll then type in the code for padding. There's also going to be a code for margin and then some other stuff. But let's do the padding first. Padding is 0px semicolon, and the margin is going to be colon 0px semicolon. Next one. You started to see things happening here. Because there's no padding, because there's no margin, the code shifted to the left. Truly floating left finally. We're going to set the list style type. Read about this when you have the time. It shows you that your list types, these little bullets that we have, they don't have to be circles. They could be squares. They could be other kinds of symbols. And really, you can even put in graphics later if you want. In the meantime, though, we're going to set it to none. So since we have these bullets, what we're telling it is we don't want any coding here to interfere with our buttons when they come in. So list style type colon is none. One disadvantage, I think, between not using Visual Studio Code is that as I was typing this, it did not suggest what I was typing. So you have to be sure that you're typing it correctly or copying and pasting precisely. But at the same time, we actually see what's going on. This is a little bit closer to what Dreamweaver does, and this being a free product, I think that it's a good learning tool. Then we're going to set the color to a color that we've had before. I'm going to copy that and continue the code by saying the color is going to be Control V and semicolon. Control V for paste. And maybe you're asking yourself, well, if we did this color, which I do think is the red one, why didn't this turn red? You see how it's underlined in blue right now? This is not your regular text. So this is text color that we're changing, but this is not regular text. These are links. So when we get to the A, that's the A code is the one that's going to change the links. Pressing enter a couple of times to continue to the next, hey, page 2. Now we're going to be working with the li tag in our HTML code. Let me open it, actually show you the Visual Studio on the index. This is our list. What we told it, we're working within the confines of navigation. And anything that we change, as long as we start the CSS code with nav, is going to cascade inside of this area. We told it then to change some things in UL, and that affects everything that's within these lines between 15 and 19. Now we're going to make changes to li, so anything that's in between these li characters as the list items, that's what's going to be changed by this. You'll notice that, and we've done a couple of links in this class, that this has a link to a hashtag. Basically what this is we don't have anywhere for it to go, but we want it to act as a link anyway. So by putting in the hashtag or pound sign or number sign, whatever you want to call it, it's got a proper name actually. I forget what it is. It doesn't matter. This just means that it's a sample link. It's going nowhere. Coming back to the recipe, since we're going to be doing li, I know now that just like navul, I can put in space and nav space li, open up the curly bracket, press enter, and make changes here. If you notice, you don't have to put in any additional spaces after any of this code. You really don't have to tab it. It could be all in one line all the way across the world. This just makes it a little bit easier to read. Our elements will be as follows. We're going to set the margin to 10 pixels. Simple enough. Margin colon 10px. semicolon. And we start to see changes. Next one is set the border width to 1 pixel. So that's a new one. Border width is 1 pixel, semicolon. So I expect that what we're doing here is we're going to be drawing buttons around this area for each one of these items. Border style is going to be solid. I guess if you notice, although we told it it's 1 pixel, it's 1 pixel of nothing because it's an invisible element at first. You need to refer to it as having an actual border. Also, you have to spell things right. So WODTH was not a real code. It's width that works. We're going to set the border style to solid, as I said. So border style, border hyphen style is solid, semicolon. Now I see the button beginning to take shape. And then we have a border color, which is a familiar color. I'm going to copy that. Border color, colon, right click, paste, semicolon. I think that it already had that, but we'll continue. We're going to set the background color to this other color, so that anywhere where that's drawing a box, not only will it have an outline for a button, it will also have a color behind it. So there's that color, but actually I wanted this to be the background color. So background color, colon, and then that color, and semicolon at the end. So what color is this, I wonder? Because I can't see anything, and I'm thinking that maybe it's the one in the background. If you do a search, a Google search, anywhere with just the hexadecimal, there's a good opportunity, there's a good chance that you'll get a result that tells you what it is. So actually it recognized this as some sort of a hex code, and it shows me several pages that will give me an answer. Oh, well, now we know it's not a web safe color, so it means it's a special color. I'll go to the first one and see what it tells me. I like the icon there, lots of colors. So yes, it's the yellow that we've been using before. So right now we're not seeing how this is affecting anything. Later on, as we move on, remember that the buttons that we're using there will have a little bit of yellow, but mostly they'll be green, and the rest of the code will help you get to that point. So there was that. We did the li tag. Now we're going to do the a tag. This is the link tag. If you want to know more about links, click on the A, and W3 Schools has lots of info on it. I'll go back to the CodePen, but now I know that the links will be white. So we'll change the colors in the links. First gotta add the links, Nav A, and do the bracket and say that the color is white, semicolon. It's a little bit hard to read, but once we add the green later, you'll be able to see it. By the way, white is also this color. It's hashtag FFFFFF. And but that's okay. We'll use white just as a reference. We'll know right away what it is. The next item is set the background color to this. You know what? I could just copy all of this instead of having to type it. Could I? Maybe not. This is not a friendly document, but I can copy the code at least. Can do background color, colon, Control V, semicolon. Once again, be sure to spell things correctly. And the background color has been added. But we want to check what this color is. If I copy and come back here, and it's that green that I was talking about. So that makes sense. Background color seems to be spelled correctly. Set the padding to 3 pixels. Semicolon. then the right padding will be 60 pixels, so this is uneven, and I'll just keep both of them. Right padding, so 60 pixels, and a semicolon, and the text decoration will be none. Text decoration is the underlining of the text when you have a link like this one. If you say no decoration, there will be no underlining. Or you can add decoration that has the line on top, or decoration that has the line go right through. So text decoration we said is none. Semicolon. And hang on, since I keep on misspelling things, let me change that to decoration with an N, and I see that up here. Background is not a real word. So now that this is spelled correctly, I see that I do still have the yellow button. It's a little bit different yellow than that one, and it's got a border of red, and then now we have this element that's green on the side with the words page 1 through 5 in there. We could change all that later if we want to. This is just a sample page, so it's not going to be really functioning, although it's going to help us in a future exercise as well. Is there anything else for navigation? And okay, this is we're gonna do a pseudo class, which is always interesting. That being said, be sure to find out more about pseudo classes in W3 schools, because pseudo meaning fake, meaning not real. It just defines a special state of an element. Whenever let's see what the sample is right here. See, when we're on top of the green, it tells the computer, tells the display to change it to blue. So this class that we have, it has a class already that says this box is green, except when something is on top of it, then it will turn blue. So this is a really cool thing about CSS, that allows you to do things like this in way lots of other places, or other things that you can do. So you'll see on the samples that it will allow you to change some things whenever a link has been visited, it has not been visited, or when there's something on top of it. You can change the color of the link, the A codes, depending on its state. All of these will turn into separate colors depending on what's going on. Try it yourself. It will give you it will show you that this is a link. If you hover on top of it, the link will turn pink. But if you visit it and you come back to it, it will turn a different color. We'll deal with that later. However, right now, in order to get the link, at least the pseudocode for the link, so say we already have that the link, this page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is white with a background color of green, with that padding around the 3 pixels to just give it a little bit of space. I guess we could give it more if we really wanted to. Oh, not that much more. Well, we'll deal with that later, but we'll say that the text decoration is none, and now we'll add another instance here of a navigation link, and we'll open up the tags, and they wanted us to turn it to this color in pseudo class. So I'll copy, come back and say change the color to that, press Ctrl V to paste. And more specifically, not just any A, but the A when something is on top of it, whenever there's a hover. And you'll see then that now this is affecting our links. Every time that I hover, it will change color from white to red, or whatever color it is. So I've been talking all this time, and I guess I could have saved this, and I still could, but since, like I said, not much we can do with it in CodePen other than look at it. And experiment with it. What I need to do now, I'm not concerned about the HTML because nothing changed, but if I click somewhere inside the CSS and press Ctrl A on my PC, Command A on your Macintosh, and then switch back into Visual Studio Code, visit my styles, and since I selected everything, I'll select everything again, Ctrl A, and then press Ctrl V as in Victor to paste. That being done, everything is pasted. And I know that it works over here, so I trust that if I save this, File, Save, Control S is your shortcut, and then check the Git button for sourcing, and check marking it, saying new CSS from CodePen, enter and commit it. So I will now hit my contextual menu, the three dots, and tell it to push. And I trust once again that this is going to my GitHub page. If I want to see it now, in my navigator here, I'm going to find a week 4 index, right click, reveal in Explorer. I get the window, and I can either double click or drag this to a browser. I'll double click it, and it opened up elsewhere, and that's fine. I'll just bring it over here. This is what opened. So I have the CSS-Designer as I've seen it before. I have all the other text that I still need to work on, but more importantly, I have these buttons on the side, and everything is will be online soon, and I can continue on to the other things. More specifically, what's going to happen is that while I may record the steps on how to do the rest of the assignment, I will not pause to give you further directions. I hope that by now you realize, and I trust that you can open up the reference material that's included in the assignment. By that I mean that every time that you hit a new element, a new thing that you're working on, there's going to be a link that takes you to W3 Schools where all the information is there for you to find. And some of these elements toward the end, they're going to be repeats. So yeah, I look forward to finishing it up and putting up just maybe a couple more videos that, like this one, block several elements into one, and then you can see the steps that are required to finish the whole site.